training camp has arrived. Training camp hype has arrived. So the people that are flying up fantasy football rankings are worth discussing, at least on this show. Let's start with Ladd McConkey. Everybody saw, I think we can put these videos up. Let's put this video up. Ladd McConkey. Look at this catch. Boom. Look at that.
Boom.
That's impressive.
Did a little twisty.
I mean, he's moving the opposite direction. Now, does this warrant Ladd McConkey price moving up? Probably not. But Ladd McConkey is a guy that is in a Chargers offense where it's wide open. We've acknowledged this all offseason long, right? Ladd McConkey is a guy to where if he can end up having an impact as a rookie, you're probably going to see quite a bit of production from him, right? It's probably not going to be like, oh, he's showing flashes this and this, because there really isn't anybody else there, right? You have Quentin Johnson. Everybody saw the video of Quentin Johnson dropping the ball, right? Everybody saw it. Now QJ's dead. We'll talk about him on the Dynasty video, blah, blah, blah. But with Ladd McConkey, I mean, man, there is so much opportunity with Justin Herbert as his quarterback. One of the best passers in the league, I might say. And if Ladd McConkey can pull it together, I think he could be a really good value at price. A lot of times what you see is rookie wide receivers in fantasy football drafts being the reason that people win leagues. We have come out and advocated for you only taking 1 to 2 rookies on your fantasy football team. We stand by this, right? Because you don't want to have that much risk tied into rookies on your fantasy football team, especially in a draft where you're only drafting 12 to 14 players on a team where you're playing in 10 to 12 team leagues. However, if you are going to draft 1 to 2 rookies on your fantasy football teams, Ladd McConkey could end up being a good option. I'm buying the hype with Ladd McConkey because I think his skill set translates to the NFL a little bit quicker than some of which we've seen even just on that team. QJ, and I do think that if he's productive, you could see him wildly outperform his ADP. What's his current ADP? I'm curious on Underdog for Ladd McConkey.
His ADP right now is wide receiver 43 at 72.8.
I mean, you're talking about the wide receiver 1 for a team, potential wide receiver 1 for a team. And yeah, he's been there all offseason. It's like, okay, why didn't you call this out before? We've talked about this. But at the same time, like, I think it's only worth discussing now because that's almost surely going to go up. Yeah. I see him climbing into the high 30s if the training camp hype continues. And even as we get into preseason games and things like that, people are going to look at Ladd McConkey's performance and say, look at this. And the fact of the matter is it doesn't really matter what we see from Ladd McConkey out of camp. He's a rookie. He's a rookie wide receiver. He is potentially the wide receiver 1 on his own team, but he's still a rookie. And so if Ladd McConkey is going to be somebody you draft on your fantasy teams, you're going to have to limit your exposure to other rookies on your team. And that is going to be our opinion no matter what happens. Mm-hmm. I'm curious what you think of Ladd, because, I mean, we've always looked at Ladd as a guy that you look at the guys going around him. A lot of those guys are younger wide receivers, rookie wide receivers, unproven wide receivers. And Ladd, in terms of situation, has as much opportunity as almost any of those guys. And we've known that this entire time.
Yeah. I'm all for calling shots and kind of going against the grain when we're talking about a lot of our data stuff that we present here on this channel where, again, we're not entirely controlled by the data that we present and the historical trends, because you do want to call your shot every once in a while and, say that this guy's going to be an outlier. And historically speaking, it hasn't been super friendly or won you a league if you take a shot on a rookie in the first 10 rounds of your fantasy draft. Ladd McConkey is one of those guys that you could take an exception shot on, and I wouldn't have an issue with it. Avery's right, though. If you're taking a shot on Ladd McConkey, if you're taking a shot on Brian Thomas, if you're taking a shot on, in the early rounds, Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., you better take that guy and not take any other rookie in the first 10 rounds of your fantasy draft. I still stand by that, but with Ladd, specifically in this offense, it really hasn't changed my opinion. A single catch in training camp in the red zone even has not changed my opinion of what I think he's going to offer in the Chargers offense in 2024. I think he's the first option going into 2024. I think he is the first option for Justin Herbert. I don't think it's Josh Palmer. I think a lot of people are inclined to say it's Josh Palmer because he's the most experienced veteran there. What has Josh Palmer done in his time in LA? Been a fringe high-end wide receiver 3? Low and wide receiver 2. Okay, cool. I really don't see much upside there. I think Ladd McConkey's the guy. They took him in the draft this year for a reason. They passed up on Neighbors and took him in the second round so they could get Joe Alt in the first. I think that speaks volumes to Ladd McConkey as a talent and what he could offer with Justin Herbert this year. Just know that their offense is going to look different than it has in past years. Not because Greg Roman isn't going to let Justin Herbert throw, because Jim Harbaugh won't allow that to happen. Correct. But it does mean that they are, realistically this year, they are probably going to be a tougher team that is a lot more ground and pound first, and then they are going to throw it significantly with Justin Herbert, and Ladd McConkey will be that guy. I just don't think he has like the craziest ceiling of all time in 2024. So just keep that in mind. Now with the next guy here, I am big on Diontae Johnson and the hype coming out of the Carolina Panthers training camp news with Dave Canales and what he's been saying. Honestly, I take Dave Canales' word for it more than I do like any other recording that I see of a single catch that anyone makes, because practice squad level players make amazing catches all the time in training camp. The reason there's impressive plays in training camp is because everybody's going at 50% speed for the most part, and everyone's fully healthy because they've had 6 months off. But with Dave Canales specifically saying, as we build our offense, we really try to feature someone. And for us right now, where's Diontae Johnson at? Like, I don't know how much more straightforward you could be when you're trying to make it clear who the focal point in an offense is going to be. It's Diontae Johnson. It has been since they traded for him in the offseason, and it will be for the entirety of 2024. Adam Thielen last year was the focal point of the Panthers' abysmal offense with Frank Reich, and he was a borderline wide receiver 1. He was a wide receiver 1 for the first 2/3 of the season, and then he tapered off. Diontae Johnson is 2 to 3 times a wide receiver that Adam Thielen is right now going into 2024. He's one of the better route runners in the NFL. They actively went and targeted him and got him at a bargain, might I add. And like, tie that with the field stretching ability and the deep threat ability of Xavier Legette and him being able to take the top off of defenses in theory. That's going to open the short to intermediate game for Diontae Johnson, which is where he makes his money and where he scores his points. I don't know what other reason you need to take Diontae Johnson. Please just take him at wide receiver 42 prices. What's his overall ADP? It's going back to back with CJ Stroud. ADP 70. Okay, he's going in the same range as Ladd McConkey. Back to back with Ladd McConkey. Honestly, Diontae Johnson is one of the reasons where I'm still kind of a little bit on the fence with Ladd McConkey and his price. It's not against Ladd McConkey. I'm just more in on Diontae Johnson. He's been a wide receiver 1 before in a subpar situation. And to me, this is going to be a pretty underrated situation with Dave Canales as the head coach, as the offensive play caller for the Carolina Panthers, which is a massive step up from Frank Reich.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's talk about Stefon Diggs. I mean, all offseason, our kind of approach to the Texans offense has been, we really don't know which one of these guys is going to be the wide receiver 1 there this year. So we're going to kind of, keep our exposure to the Texans wide receivers light. Even given the fact that the Texans were a top 10 passing offense in the league last year, and CJ Stroud, as a rookie, looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the entire league, winning Rookie of the Year for the NFL. Now, it's come out of training camp a couple times now that Stefon Diggs, this headline, Stefon Diggs is already making the Bills regret trading him. It's like, whatever. But this is actually something. This is a tweet from a Texans beat reporter. His name's DJ Bien Aim. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Sorry, DJ. But he is somebody who's on the ground at training camp, somebody who covers the Texans. If there's anybody that we trust to actually give us takes from training camps about teams, it's beat writers, right?
Yes.
In Indy, we trust the beat writers, right? The beat writers typically have a pretty good pulse of what's going on around the team. They're around the team all the time. They're at every training camp practice they're watching. And here's what he says after watching the Texans training camp practice. Through 8 practices of the Texans training camp, it appears Stefon Diggs is the number 1 right now. In terms of targets and catches throughout camps, Diggs leads in all of it. Second in targets is Nico Collins and then Tank Dell. We will see if anything changes.
Now, some of that is building chemistry with a brand new team, right? So in training camp, you kind of already have that chemistry built with Nico Collins, Tank Dell, those other guys. So they probably, right, if I'm just playing devil's advocate and being a little bit realistic here, I don't think there's any less questions than there were going into training camp for Stefon Diggs and what his position is going to be in that offense, because Nico Collins and Tank Dell didn't disappear. They're still there, and Stefon Diggs is still the new guy there. So he does have to spend a lot more time, him and CJ Stroud, building that chemistry that has already been pre-established with the other 2 guys in that offense.
However, is it unfathomable that Stefon Diggs is the wide receiver 1 in Houston? No.
Absolutely
not. In fact, if you asked me who I thought the favorite was to be the wide receiver 1 in that offense, regardless of all the hype, regardless of what's coming out of training camp so far, I think it is Stefon Diggs.
He's the guy who's consistently been a wide receiver 1 for the last 6 years.
Stefon Diggs is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL in the past 5 years. He's whether he's better than Nico now or not, I can tell you he's a better, more well-rounded wide receiver than Nico Collins is. Because Nico Collins, you see a lot of where he's getting his production is a little bit limited. As great as Nico is, Nico has wide receiver 1 upside. You saw it last year. But Nico Collins is being drafted again and priced as a wide receiver 1 at the wide receiver 12. While Stefon Diggs, who has a chance to be the wide receiver 1. Look, do you think, let's put it in percentages. There's probably, at best, if you want to give Nico Collins an edge, for being the wide receiver 1 in Houston, you're giving him no more than a 60-40 handicap to be the wide receiver 1.
Right.
Is that worth he being the wide receiver 12 in ADP for fantasy football drafts versus Stefon Diggs being the wide receiver 23 in ADP for fantasy football drafts? The answer is no. The price difference, it would be different if it were they were being drafted 3-4 spots apart. They're being drafted 11 spots apart. That's a big difference. Not only that, you're getting Stefon Diggs right now in the third round of fantasy football drafts. In a third round, like a 2-3 turn area, actually this is late third, where you really aren't sure in that range who's going to be consistent again this year and actually repeat as a high-performing fantasy football asset. So with Stefon Diggs, it's less about like, is he the wide receiver 1? Is Nico the wide receiver 1? And I think most people would agree it's probably one of those two. So when it comes to the Texans offense, yeah, I'm still avoiding, having a ton of shares of those guys. But if I am going to draft one, I will take the cheaper one, significantly cheaper one. Mm-hmm. My verdict on that has kind of been the same all offseason. This is solidifying it for me. It's possible it's a chemistry thing. I think it's possible. I think it's possible this is the case. It would not surprise me at all.
I wouldn't be surprised at all, and that's why Diggs is my favorite target of the wide receivers in Houston going right now.
I think he's the clear favorite. So
yes.
Let's talk about Bateman.
Yeah, Rashod Bateman has honestly probably been the star of training camp hype so far. I think the amount of talk coming out of Baltimore saying, he's looking like a wide receiver 1. He's looking like this guy. Look, I mean,
better than Zay Flowers
is better than Zay Flowers, right? Is this? To me, I look at this and I'm like, are they just validating the money that they paid him? Like the extension that they had? What are you laughing at?
We had all this hype, and then the sleeper alert that came across my phone today was Rashod Bateman's status has changed from healthy to questionable. I'm like, there it is. That's it. That's why.
That's a big question. That's
pointed at it.
That
right there.
Yeah, that's what it's been for the last 3 years of his career. For me, outside of it being historically a historically low chance that Bateman will actually break out in his 4th year in the NFL, going into his 4th year. Outside of that, I've seen more from Zay Flowers already. I've got Mark Andrews coming back healthy. I've seen a year of a non-Greg Roman-led offense with the Baltimore Ravens, and that is room for 2 guys, Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers. I'm sorry, Rashod Bateman ain't eating into that. He's not eating into that. He may be a weapon for the Baltimore Ravens as an NFL asset, as an NFL talent, as an NFL weapon, not a fantasy weapon, not a super high upside fantasy guy. I'm not taking the objectively third, really 4th option in that offense. I mean, Derrick Henry. They're going to Derrick Henry and Flowers / Andrews before they go to Bateman. Like, let's just be honest with ourselves. Let's be realistic. Who do you think everyone on the defensive side of the ball is worried about when they play the Ravens? Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews. Are they peeing themselves because they see Rashod Bateman on the other side of the field?
I would be.
I mean, apparently so. Apparently, with all the hype here. Maybe I'm being callous. Maybe I'm being ignorant here. But to me, this is pretty straightforward. This is the Ravens PR campaign trying to support the fact that they just paid Bateman a ridiculous amount of money for doing absolutely nothing for them in the first 3 years of his career.
Yeah. Let's turn to another rookie wide receiver here with Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman is a guy that's going to be on a team with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in Josh Allen.
Yep.
And a team where we just talked about Stefon Diggs. Stefon Diggs leads a massive void in targets for somebody to step in potentially and get some more production this year immediately. And Keon Coleman was always a guy that was considered a favorite to do that, right? Because he was drafted by the Buffalo Bills early in the NFL draft, early enough to where people thought he could have an immediate production. Now, let's get one thing clear. Keon Coleman was always kind of a project guy. He was a little bit raw. He's a little bit underdeveloped. And so if he comes out this year and he doesn't do anything, I don't think it's a big deal. But I also think it's kind of been in, will you check his ADP for me while I'm talking? I kind of think it's been baked into his price. But I want to read you. I know everybody hates this account for the most part, so I'm just going to read it to you in my news voice. Here we go. Keon Coleman is a freak. Fire emoji. Coleman is reportedly already the Bills' wide receiver 1. Why does this guy put quotes around everything? Like, it's like laser beams, like sharks with laser beams on, like, and they're just a few days into training camp.
Laser sharks.
Yes. Some reporters on the ground reportedly believe Coleman already has a better chemistry with Josh Allen than Stefon Diggs. Okay.
Dude.
Okay. Cool. The Bills found their wide receiver 1 of the future, and he's an athletic anomaly. Yeah, okay. So here's the thing. I think Keon Coleman could be a really good NFL wide receiver. Nothing has changed about my opinion with Keon Coleman.
No, nothing's changed.
It's the same thing as Ladd McConkey.
Yep.
He could be good, but he's less polished than Ladd McConkey is. And his skill set translates less immediately to the NFL than Ladd McConkey's does. He has as much opportunity, but it doesn't really matter.
Look, Dalton Kincaid is our wide receiver one in that offense, and I think we stand by that, and we are going to stand by that and die on that hill in 2024. I mean, he's a guy that we've considered putting in our wide receiver rankings. Just because, just to make a point.
Not actually, but
no.
So then the Keon Coleman tweet, the first reply under it was some guy named Fire Adams, and he said, I was at camp today. He dropped 4 passes before this one he almost dropped. Bill's starting wide receivers are Samuel, Hollins, and Shakir. This guy will be lucky to bring in 20 catches this season.
Welcome
so there
to
you go.
training camp.
I mean, there's both sides. There's some guys trying to bet at 21 or more perceptions at even money. Again,
right. And Keon Coleman is a guy that we've known, even as a prospect, had a lot of work to do. And I don't think Keon Coleman is dead in the water. I'm not gonna, take a shot and say that Keon Coleman's an absolute bust for the Bills and that he's going to do 0 for them this year. But I mean, when you're looking at his price going back to back with JSN, going just ahead or just behind Brian Thomas and Ladd McConkey and Diontae Johnson, every single one of those guys I'm taking over Keon Coleman.
A couple fun replies to that tweet. Besides people wanting to bet him. I was at camp today with your mom. You weren't there, son. You weren't at camp. You weren't at camp. You were in summer school. I can tell off of your name that you have no idea what you're talking about. Twitter is...
Get off Twitter. Just get off Twitter, please.
Yes. All right, next guy.
Gosh. Next guy we're going to have here that, maybe we can talk a little more seriously about is Chase Brown, because I think there is some serious news coming out of Cincinnati's training camp hype with Chase Brown. He is taking the majority of first-team snaps over Zach Moss in Cincinnati. I think part of that is Chase Brown is the pre-established running back there. He was being developed behind Joe Mixon as a rookie in 2023. He has a significant amount of passing opportunity that he could offer for the Bengals in 2024. Mm-hmm. And I think we did know going into this season that even though Zach Moss was coming into there, and we are still willing to bet on Zach Moss over Chase Brown, that it was going to be a pretty even split, probably 60-40. Now, what we know is Zach Moss. Here's what we know with Zach Moss, and we don't know with Chase Brown. Zach Moss, when he is the lead running back in an offense, has the ability to produce as a running back one. We literally just saw it last year. Jonathan Taylor was out for the first half of the season, and it's literally the Colts didn't even miss a beat in the run game.
Yeah,
definitely missed JT.
It was crazy,
but it was insane how impressive Zach Moss was, and he showcased that even at the end of 2022. If you remember, when he finally got that lead opportunity, he went off, and he really earned it in 2023 as well. I think you're going to see him earn it this year. And I think Chase Brown is not going to be the odd man out. There's absolutely a place and an avenue for Chase Brown to get get some really nice opportunity in Cincinnati's offense. What we do know is there's no longer a Joe Mixon there, and Zach Moss is not going to be Joe Mixon, and Chase Brown is not going to be Joe Mixon. Zach Moss and Chase Brown together will be Joe Mixon. And I think that's a pretty good bet to have. So even though we're seeing Chase Brown taking a majority of snaps, what's a majority? 55%? Compared to 45%. Like to me, this is just seeing what Chase Brown can do with a more with a heavier workload.
Yeah,
and a heavier workload being less than however many snaps he got last year, which was like 20%, 30%. It wasn't a significant amount. With Zach Moss, we know what we're getting from Zach Moss, and that hasn't changed. When Cincinnati signed him this offseason, they knew what he could do with a bell cow workload because he demonstrated it on film game in and game out last year. Of course, Chase Brown is going to get a significant amount of snaps, in my opinion, in training camp because, again, they want to see what they're getting out of him when they know what they have out of Zach Moss.
And I will say, it's possible.
Absolutely possible.
Chase Brown, apparently he's been taking the first team reps. It doesn't mean anything yet. It's not out of the range of possibilities that he does, and that we just ended up incorrect on this.
This is probably outside of Diontae Johnson and Ladd. This is the most serious conversation that we are having, and probably what we're monitoring the most this offseason is Chase Brown and Zach Moss in training camp. So even though, again, I have my own opinion about why Chase Brown is getting the majority of snaps in training camp, I could be totally wrong. And honestly, this hype merits you taking Chase Brown in your fantasy drafts at price because his price isn't abysmal right now.
It's lower than Zach Moss.
It is lower than Zach Moss. He's running back 35 right now, going back to back with Gus Edwards. Give me Chase Brown.
Chase Edmonds, wow. Welcome to 2021.
Oh, boy. Yeah, give me Chase Brown. He's going back-to-back with Trey Benson, who, honestly, that's kind of a toss-up. Trey Benson is objectively playing behind James Conner, and he will not get his opportunity on the field consistently until James Conner goes down. That's just a matter of when is James Conner going to go down, which I would rather not account for injury, and I would rather account for a guy like Chase Brown who has an avenue to just take the starting job if he goes off.
Yeah, I agree. All right, last guy here. Let's talk about J.K. Dobbins. And everybody's going to be talking about the running back room in L.A. We've already talked about it. We think Kamani Vidal is a good pick because Kamani Vidal, you're getting him very, very cheap. He's the running back 48 right now. But actually, J.K. Dobbins is going behind him at running back 53. Now, here's the thing. I'm not necessarily buying the hype with J.K. Dobbins just yet. Not because I don't think that... Not because I don't think that J.K. Dobbins isn't good, but it's because with as much hype as we've seen from J.K. Dobbins already...
I'll tell you why we're laughing.
the top headline for J.K. Dobbins is Rashawn Slater / J.K. Dobbins leave practice early on Friday. Yeah, that's why we're not in on J.K. Dobbins. Like, look, if J.K. Dobbins would have been healthy the last 3 years, he would have been one of the best running backs in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. But the same is true for Rashad Penny, right? I mean, guys, the if clause with injuries at the running back position is too big an if. Now, if you want to draft J.K. Dobbins at running back 53 prices in the 14th round, most leagues aren't even getting there. Pick him off waivers, whatever. Just know that even if he does ball out in weeks 1, 2, and 3, he's probably going to be hurt by week 4. I don't like to predict injury. I'm just saying we've seen a pretty clear trend, right? I mean, it's one thing to...
This is like a kind of like a Darren Waller thing where it's like he's been struggling with the same hamstring injury for the last 3 years. You probably don't want to project that he's going to be a top 3 producing tight end in 2023 when he's been struggling with the same hamstring injury for the last 3 years. And it's not as severe because
of where he's being drafted. But, I mean, he played 15 games in his rookie year. And in the past 3 years, he has played 9 games total and scored a grand total of 92 fantasy points in that span. In 3 years.
It's only a matter of time.
And
it's only a matter of time before this guy's a true running back one that he's always supposed to be.
I don't think anybody is going... I don't... And part of the reason this was a thing is because he came out and said, I can be one of the best in the league. Everybody knows that. So did Rashad Penny, said the same thing. And it's like, yeah... Okay, if he gets the carry volume is what the thing was. And honestly, I think 2 years ago that would have been true.
Yeah.
But no player coming off an injury like that is going to come out in front of the media and say like, yeah, odds are I'm going to get hurt again this year, or odds are like I'm not going to produce in this room.
I mean, in fairness to him, like, what do you expect him to say?
That's exactly
do you think he's going to say, yeah, I think I'm actually going to suck?
But so with JK, you want to take a dart throw on JK? I'm fine with it. At this point, I have no reason to believe that this year won't be like every other single year we've seen from J.K. Dobbins. So, Draft guide is available, flockfantasy.com/domain. Use code domain, choose Mother Flock tree. You get this sexy-looking draft guide. Yes, I called a draft guide sexy. That tells you how passionately I feel about the draft guide. I mean, it is sexy.
It's pretty accurate. Like, it's pretty great.
Use code domain. Sign up for any Mother Flocker tier, you get the draft guide. And when we spend a lot of time on this, it's over 50 pages long. It includes in-depth analysis on strategies and positions and every single player in the top 12 rounds of fantasy football draft. So like I said, code domain, flockfantasy.com/domain, Mother Flocker tier. Okay? Make sure you drop a like. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We appreciate you guys so much. We'll see you later.